Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Abhimanyu and I am the event manager with Contingency Corporation and would be your today's host. Thank you everyone for joining in today's live webinar, Project Management Essentials, the 8 keys to completing every project on time and on budget. Today's presenter is Mr. Krish Devani. I'll quickly introduce Mr. Krish. Mr. Krish is a keynote speaker at Compliance Key Incorporation. Mr. Krish is also founder and president of Pinnacle Performance Improvement Worldwide, a firm which focuses on management and organization development. Pinnacle's client includes such organizations as Microsoft, Visa International, the Society for HU. Now, before I hand it over to Mr. Krish, I should inform you that the session will be of 90 minutes. Also, we have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You can keep sending your questions through the chat window and Mr. Krish will answer those questions at the end. We'll begin now. Mr. Krish, I request you to please start the presentation.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. So glad you could join us today as we cover this very important topic. It impacts so many of us every day, sometimes multiple times every day. As we cover project management essentials and the 8 keys to completing every project on time and on budget. So we have 4 key learning objectives today. First, we're here to help you manage your projects even more consistently, to raise everyone's awareness to the process of project management, to help us acquire and or enhance our project management skills, and to increase our communication skills. So with no further ado, I'm going to present the process to everyone, and one of the goals is that you'll be able to apply the concepts that we cover today to every project that you work on, including any you are currently working on. I will do my best along the way to share as many current and recent examples of these concepts on projects where we have cooperated, facilitated as a consultant. So why should we use project management? Well, 5 thoughts come to mind. First of all, using project management helps save us time, energy, and frustration. It also gives our internal customers, our colleagues, more time to be spent with external customers. Project management gets product to market faster. It improves the quality of our work lives, and project management helps us meet our corporate goals. What is project management? Here is one definition. Think about this. Project management, we suggest, is the negotiation of commitments, very important, from specialized resources. That would be you, me, and all of our colleagues. For example, in our organization, we have 8 client project teams. So our consulting firm is currently working on 8 client assignments, 8 different organizations. 6 are in the U.S. and 2 are in Europe. So we have many specialized resources, many human beings who do outstanding work, and they contribute to each of our project teams. Project management is also the guidance of those specialized resources towards specific business objectives within a wider organizational strategy. Said differently, our project goals should always be consistent with our corporate goals. Okay, so why should we use project management? Let's start in the upper left and work our way around, then we'll make it into the middle. First of all, we should use project management to ensure that customer requirements are met in an efficient manner. For example, we've been working for the last year or so on a construction project team, and we facilitate these discussions for our client. Our client is a hospital, and this hospital is in the process of building a 3rd wing, a new wing to their hospital, and they have many requirements. We are not a construction firm, but what we do is we help facilitate that particular project. Secondly, upper right-hand corner, project management helps us eliminate reinventing the wheel by standardizing routine project work. And another way that project management can help us eliminate reinventing the wheel every time is when our organization is using some form of corporate intranet. We first saw this in practice, I want to say it was about 15 years ago, with a major utility, and now this is so common, I would say it's approaching universal, where let's say there's a project team in another part of our organization. They work on and they complete a project. Well, as we'll reference later in the webinar, it's very important after a project is completed that that project team has a lessons learned meeting where the team reviews what went well, what we did well, and also what could have worked better, what could we have done better. They then save that information and upload it onto a corporate intranet, usually password protected, so this way only internal employees can access it. And then maybe one of us on our project team who didn't work on that project finds that this project that the other team just worked on, it very closely resembles aspects or maybe close to our entire project. So we access our corporate intranet, we review, if nothing else, the lessons learned from that project team. We might review a bit more, and then we have some prior learning which we can apply to our current project and to all our future projects. Lower right corner, we use project management to help minimize the risk of project failure. Yeah, that happens sometimes. However, when we use effective and consistent project management practices, we significantly minimize the risk that our project will fail, in large part because, as we'll discuss also, we engage in some pre-project planning and risk management. We also do some risk anticipation, and then how we will respond to any of the possible risks which we forecast before we start our project. And then lower left corner, we use project management to reduce the number of tasks that could potentially be overlooked during the project. The more complete we are with our project planning, the greater the likelihood that we will have fewer bumps in the road, if you will, and we will have a smoother and more consistently practiced and a timely and financially sound project. All four of these reasons for project management support what's in the middle. All four of these reasons help promote teamwork and cross-functional accountability. Extraordinarily important. Okay, so what is a project? I'm going to make the first reference of several today to the Project Management Institute. Please be sure to write this down if you are not familiar with the Project Management Institute. Their website is PMI, as in projectmanagementinstitute.org. I vigorously encourage you to access their website and see the many resources that one can utilize. A number of people use the Project Management Institute both online and at some of their in-person workshops to provide initial certification in project management expertise and ongoing continuing education and recertification as certified project managers, as professional project managers. There are a variety of designations. So the publication I also encourage you to access is referenced here. So first, what is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor, so over a specific period of time, undertaken to create a unique product or service. We see in parentheses it says PMBOK definition. That stands for the Project Management Book of Knowledge, published by the Project Management Institute. One more time, it's PMI.org, and I vigorously encourage you, if you've not already, to access the Project Management Book of Knowledge, purchase or rent a copy. I know that you can do either. That I have found PMBOK to be an outstanding resource to help me when I'm facilitating and managing projects. Okay, so before we dive in, let's understand that there are 5 phases to every project life cycle, and these include phase 1, where we initiate our project, phase 2, where we plan our project. So these two are referencing planning the execution of our project. Then phase 3 is implementing, and phase 4 is controlling, both of these referencing performing the tasks of our project. And finally, phase 5 is where we complete the project. That's where we achieve the results, and again, incorporated in there is our project management team lessons learned meeting after we finished. Okay, so we're going to look first at initiating our project. What are the steps involved? Well, 2 of the inputs that we should access include past lessons learned. This is the second reference of many to our having a corporate intranet where we can access all the other project teams' lessons learned, which they processed in their closeout meeting, their lessons learned meeting. Sometimes it's a celebration after their projects were completed. And we also need, of course, a charter from our executive sponsor. We need someone at the executive level who is going to authorize our project. And after we've done that, we start to assemble our core team. Now, let me be clear on referencing this concept. A core team, as we'll see in a moment, generally consists of 6 to 9 team members. If we have more than 9 team members on our project team, on our core team, we may want to consider adding some sub-teams. If our project team is 9 people or fewer, our core team is our project team. Secondly, we want to build core team ownership. Third, we want to conduct preliminary planning. And fourth, we want to validate that we're ready to initiate our project. Okay, so first, assembling our core team, we want to identify 6 to 9 core team members. Our project manager works with our project leader, and I'll define both of those roles very clearly in just a couple of slides. So the project manager works with the project leader. The project executive sponsor and functional leaders help assign resources for each functional area to be represented on the core team / project team based on the best available match of required skills. Secondly, we want to verify the availability of our proposed core team project team members. We want to then create a core team organizational chart, one example of which I have in just a few slides. And then the project manager will be holding one-on-one discussions with core team members to prepare them for involvement with both project initiation and in the planning of the project. So our core team, what does our core team do? Again, more than 9 team members. Our core team, we may form some sub-teams that report to our core team. Project team, 9 members or fewer. The core team is the project team. So the core team provides strategic direction for the project by utilizing their decision-making authority to bring resolution to issues raised by the various sub-teams involved in the development of the product. And the core team also delivers the product against the established timeline by establishing any issues, concerns, or decisions affecting their ability to deliver against the timeline to the management team and the executive sponsor managing the budget for the development project. So executive sponsor may or may not also be the one who authorizes financial expenditure. Sometimes we've worked with an executive team where, say, the CEO or an executive vice president will designate the financial authorization capacity perhaps to the chief financial officer or the finance director. So what might the core team structure look like? Whoops, somehow okay, well, that happens. Good news, though, in just a few slides, we'll see a setup of a sample core team structure added to by sub-teams. So we'll be able to visit this in just a moment. Now, as I promised a few minutes ago, let's take a look at the roles of both the project manager and the project leader in specifics, and also to help better understand their roles, responsibilities, and their interactions. So the project manager is the major process owner for the team. The project leader is the major content owner for the team. The project manager is responsible for, and they usually will designate this responsibility to someone on the team who is responsible for keeping track of the meeting minutes, the agendas, and the meeting schedule. And the project leader, though, is responsible as the primary overall strategic leader of the team. When it comes to communication, the project manager is the center of the team communication plan, and we'll share both the concept of the team communication plan with a template to review. The project leader, meanwhile, ensures that the project plan allows rapid and robust time to market. The project manager knows the tools of the project management trade and is responsible for the project plan. The project leader knows the skills and resources that are needed to carry out the fulfillment of the project. The project manager manages resources and facilitates resolution of issues. The project leader resolves issues and also manages identifying any potential risks and then solution approaches to address any and all anticipated risks. The project manager is responsible both for managing the budget and for integrating all the people and resources for the successful completion of the project. The project leader ensures that sound decisions are made. And as we can see, the project manager backs up the project leader backs up the project manager. I've worked on many projects where also the project manager and project leader will each have an assistant and or a backup in case for some reason either or both cannot make a project team meeting. And both, as we can see with the 2 bullet points towards the bottom of the slide, both the project manager and leader guide the establishment of the vision and the tone for the team. And they both also participate in the development of the team's strategic direction and maintain the alignment of the team. Next, we want to take a look at building our core team/project team ownership. So we review all the inputs, and again, that includes the past lessons learned, as well as the charter from the executive sponsor, and we start to develop what we call the project overview statement. Again, template coming up, and I'll cover each element of the project overview statement, or POS, in great detail. Then we want to identify the stages of our project and any tangible milestones that we can identify. And the value especially of identifying any tangible milestones, it helps us track our progress. For example, we might come up on a, let's see, I'm trying to think of a recent one. Oh, I know. We are helping an organization right now in a move of their headquarters from Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. And this is comprehensive. Now, we are not doing any of the heavy lifting. However, because we forecast that it will take approximately 3 months from start to finish for the move to happen, and some of the contingencies involve the finalization of the lease at the new property and just the resolution of any outstanding issues on the current lease where they're currently located. So because we've identified a timeline of approximately 3 months, we thought it would be helpful to identify milestones after 1 month and after 2 months. This helps keep everyone on pace, and in fact, we designed 4 milestones every 2 weeks. So I should say, I'm sorry, 1 milestone every 2 weeks for a total of 4 over the first 2 months, and then the final milestones, meaning the completion of the project, will be at approximately 12 weeks. Okay, then we develop what we call an influencer assessment, again, template and examples to follow, and we also develop our project team communication plan, template and examples to follow. So, first promise template is our project overview statement. We include the name of our project, and if our organization uses codes, then we enter it there. We list the names of both the project manager and the project leader, and we also identify any core stakeholders. So if I could, for example, back to that hospital building the new wing project that I mentioned a few minutes ago. On that project, we have 2 core stakeholders. Now, 95% of the time in my experience, stakeholders are people who are not involved regularly in the planning and or the execution of the project. However, these are people who have a literal stake in the success of the project. So on the hospital wing construction project team, we have 2 stakeholders, each of whom donated over $1 million to the hospital specifically for the building of the new wing. And both individuals were asked, and both said, not surprisingly, no, we don't need to be involved. And it's about an 18-month project. We're now about 12 months into it. So before we started the project, we asked these 2 stakeholders, to what extent do you want to be involved? And they said, honestly, both of them said, just copy us on the project team meetings. We can read them at our leisure, and this way you'll just keep us posted, and we appreciate that. So their names on that project are listed here, where it says core stakeholders. Then, of course, our project goal or mission, who are we, what is the main deliverable, and for whom? And very importantly, right near the top, what is the organizational objective that completing this project on time and on budget will help us achieve? We then list any deliverables, which are usually related to specific project objectives. We then list the major activities and groups of activities. Here is where the risk management starts to come in. On the left, in this next section, we list any potential obstacles. And the encouragement here from past experience is allow brainstorming to occur here in our project planning team meeting, and also don't negate anything. Let everyone have an opportunity to voice, because the more potential obstacles we identify, and then the contingencies we facilitate to help us address any of these potential obstacles. In other words, the contingencies are the solution approach we're going to take for each of our potential obstacles. So the more obstacles we identify before we start our project, the better prepared we're going to be to deal with any of those obstacles, risks that occur while we are working on our project. After that, we list critical success factors. What metrics are going to help us measure our progress, and also how will we know ultimately that we have been successful above and beyond completing our project on time and on budget. what are the critical success factors? Are there certain people we need to have involved? Are there certain milestones that definitively need to be addressed on a very timely schedule? Then what is our budget? What is our time frame, keeping us on track again? Who prepared this? What is the date? Any revisions made, we list those there. There then should be approval by what we call our core stakeholder group. This is often the project manager and project leader will initial here. And then what is the date? Okay, so that's our project overview statement. This helps us start to effectively and consistently plan our project. So for every project, we should be answering this. We should finish the statement. This project will be completed when, ... That's an important prompt for every project. So next, in making sure we relate our project goal to at least one corporate objective, what we do here at the top of this diagram is our product leadership. In this example is an example of our corporate strategy. This comes from a pharmaceutical firm that we've been working with for several years. They're very proud of the new products that they help develop. And how do they develop them? Well, first there's research and development, which often can take 1 year or several years. Then, of course, there has to be testing, which is monitored by the Food and Drug Administration. And so in this particular pharmaceutical firm, they take great pride in their ability and in people's abilities to lead product development projects from start to finish. That is one of their corporate objectives is to be the undisputed leader, #1 or #2 in all of their product development projects. So on the project itself, that corporate goal is kept in mind. So on every pharmaceutical development project, they will list objectives. So in this case, we have just, objective 1 for developing this new pharmaceutical. And we then below that list the individuals who are working on the project. So in this case, we have 7 people on the project team. Okay. Next, I promised what we call a responsibility assignment matrix. This helps everyone working on a project understand what is our list of major activities, first column, and then who among us are responsible for providing input, participating, being accountable, perhaps reviewing that activity, and or for signing off on that activity. So to be simple and straightforward, first column we list all our major project activities, then we go to the right for each of these activities. We go across and we indicate, in this case we use single letters to represent. So let's say a major activity on a project is meeting with the executive sponsor. So that is usually taken on by either the project manager or the project leader. They would list T, I, and A. They would participate. They would provide input, and they'd be held accountable for that. They could probably, for that activity, review each other and sign off. But I'll share in a moment what we call our influencer assessment, where we discuss how certain stakeholders are involved, how certain stakeholders are communicated with and how frequently, and then also we'll understand who is responsible for each influencer interaction. All right, communication we understand is important. So let's think for a moment about understanding the overall communication process. there are potential sources of error every step of the way. So first, let's say I'm the project manager and you all are members of our project team. So I have an intended message which I share. You are often going to receive my intended message as an encoded message. And the influences there, above and beyond all of our communication skills, are the influences of background, past experiences, organizational pressures, personality, self-image, etc. In other words, all of those factors contribute to how I might say the message and how you might receive it. Then we say, okay, what is the actual message? Well, the factors which influence the delivery of the actual message, let's say we're having a project planning meeting, and I'll stay in this role of project manager. How I say, what I say is going to influence how you receive the message or messages. What is the content we're addressing? And therefore, what is your level of interest? What tone do I use as the presenter, and how do you receive that tone? How is my body language and facial expressions? How do you receive those? What is the context of a specific communication, a specific meeting, and a series of communications? And how do you receive those? And then finally, there is a perceived message versus a decoded message. And this is where your background, past experiences, personality, self-image, etc., are going to potentially influence how you receive my intended message as a perceived message, and then you decode that perceived message. Two favorite expressions which relate to this. First is from Stephen Covey: seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And perhaps a greater favorite, and forgive me, I'm forgetting for just, Thomas Banville, B-A-N-V-I-L-L-E, wrote this. See if you can follow this one along. This is not easy. I know that you think you understood what you heard me say, but I am not at all sure that what you heard is exactly what I meant. Let me say that one more time. I know you think you understand what you heard me say, but I am not at all sure that you understood what I said and how it was meant. People will interpret different messages in different ways, which reinforces and supports, again, the notion of written communication. Now, let's be real. There are always opportunities for misinterpreting or misunderstanding written information. However, written information is often less misinterpreted or better interpreted than spoken communication. Let me add this too, and believe me, this is learned from some very painful experiences. Anytime we've had a verbal communication with someone, whether it's a brief happenstance encounter in the hallway, whether it's during a meeting, whether it's during a one-on-one conversation, as soon as that verbal exchange is completed, we should rush like heck to our computers, to our devices, and compose a thoughtful, doesn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes, but compose a thoughtful attempt to communicate with everyone else on the project team the core messages that were just shared. Now, are we all perfect at composing and then sending these? Of course not. However, I have learned, again, from making way too many more mistakes than I'm willing to admit, but having made many mistakes in this area, I try to find time ASAP in my schedule as soon after a meeting or discussion has been completed. So while the thoughts are still fresh in my mind, I can at least send an email to everyone else on the project team to which they'll respond. Sometimes people say, you know, Chris, I agree with everything you said. Sometimes people say, well, Chris, I agree with you on points 1 and 4, but on 2, 3, and 5, I have a slightly different take. Here's what they are. So by taking that lead, by taking that initiative for the post-verbal written communication, we set the tone. We are acting as leaders as well as effective managers, and we give everyone a foundation on which to perhaps confirm their 100% agreement or to offer some agreement and some disagreement along with some differing interpretations. It can be a bumpy process, but when there's a written trail that people follow, it significantly minimizes misunderstandings and miscommunications. Okay, so why should we communicate? Well, one of the most important factors in ensuring communication is one of the most important factors in ensuring successful completion of project deliverables. Who's involved? Well, our executive sponsor, our stakeholders, and of course all our project team members, including the project manager and project leader. How do we do this? Oh, before I forget, project we worked on about a year ago also lasted the prep process and then the execution process. So let's see, so the planning process was almost 6 months, and then the execution occurred over about a week. Let me just briefly explain. The CFO of an organization was about to be promoted to CEO, and because the date coincided with their regularly scheduled annual management meeting, he decided to invite, this is actually 3 companies in one, he decided to invite all 96 executives and senior managers around the globe from this multinational organization, and he also chose from the podium, this is the brand new CEO, former CFO, said the following: in planning all your projects, I encourage you to use Excel when you can. It is helpful to use Microsoft Project Management. And then he said something I'll never forget, because rarely does one hear this from a CEO. He said, as soon as you encounter some bad news, I want to hear about it immediately. He said, of course I'll be disappointed or upset at the initial approach by you. He said, however, the sooner you come to me with bad news, the sooner we can sit down together and try to figure out how to solve the problem, whatever it is. I thought that was one of the more brilliant insights ever shared by a CEO. How do we communicate? Well, of course, we have written reports, meetings, schedules, databases. One project team I worked on, there was an internal project leader, also an internal project manager, and these two decided to use Excel, and then their process included on the Friday before our weekly conference call, they would send out the agenda for the Monday conference call. We would have a never more than 90-minute weekly conference call because we were planning an extensive, detailed project. And we met by phone once a week. By the end of every Monday, we received the first draft of the agenda for the meeting next Monday. Very impressive. It kept and it keeps everyone on the same page. What tool do we use for communication? Well, of course, we document it, and we'll get to that shortly. I mentioned earlier what we call an influencer assessment. Here is a description, and then a template will follow shortly. An influencer assessment is the identification of people who can have an impact on the project, either positive or negative, and the action plan used to manage their influence. we revise this and revisit it as necessary, and we use our influencer assessment to generate a project communication plan. Here we go. So, influencers, these are people, as just defined, who have a significant impact. Often, the first influencer or influencers are anyone who signs the check or checks to keep our project going. Sometimes the CEO will be named as an influencer, although, of course, they're not involved on that particular project team. And sometimes multiple executives or senior managers are listed as influencers who are not part of the project team. Why are they included? That's why we have a reason column. What is our action plan for communicating with each influencer? Are we going to send them a weekly email? Are we going to communicate with them via email, let's say, after every project team meeting? Once the meeting minutes are composed, who, if anyone, do we send it to? What's our action plan? Are some of us going to meet periodically with any of the influencers? And if so, how frequently? What's our responsibility? Who on the project team is responsible for interacting with and communicating with that particular influencer? What's the due date for the communication? And many times there will be multiple dates listed for communicating with a specific influencer. And then any status updates belong in the final column. Okay, so what is our communication plan? Well, first, it provides a protocol for communication with project sponsors, stakeholders, and team members, providing information regarding the audience. Who are the recipients of our project results? And a communication plan should be developed upon initiation of the project team. As soon as the project team is formed, one of the next agenda items for that project team to address is our project communication plan. Who are we going to communicate with? How frequently are we going to communicate with them? How are we going to communicate with them? All very important. And this communication plan should be used to manage all communication activities. All right. So here is just one column, pardon me, of an example within a communication plan. However, we have the 6 major line items listed. So going across at the top, who is our audience group? What is our purpose and or key message that we are conveying to that audience group and incorporating into our communication with that audience group? What's the vehicle we're going to use? So what method of communication are we going to use where it says delivery vehicle? Who is the developer and or owner of that particular, in this case, it's a presentation? What is the date for communicating with that audience group? There may very well be multiple dates. And what, if any, feedback or comments are we receiving? And are people suggesting we incorporate into our project team? So to follow this example along in the second row, our audience group here is our steering committee. The purpose and key message from our project team to our steering committee is to update the steering committee on the progress towards achieving the next milestone. How are we going to communicate with them? We're going to make a presentation. Our project manager, pardon me, is going to make that presentation. Our first one on this project was September 15th of last year, and several people on the project team reminded us, be sure that you document the meeting and then distribute the meeting minutes ASAP after the meeting and the presentation to the steering committee. Okay, so next we're ready to plan our project. We're planning the execution. What are the inputs? Well, of course, we get formal approval from our sponsor. here is where we have an initial budget estimate, and we have already completed, we just completed our top-down project plan. So what do we do? What are the steps for planning the project? Well, first we organize our full project team, then we develop detailed sub-team plans, we rigorously revise our project plan, we also validate the estimate, we establish other resources, we assign resources to tasks, and we initiate team member performance. So first we organize our full project team. We determine the resource, what are the resources we need, and any assignments for any sub-team members. We create an organizational chart for the full team, and as we'll see together, there will be a graphic on one slide that shows a core team and a number of sub-teams. We'll conduct our project kickoff meeting. Back to our hospital wing project, the two stakeholders said, you know what, that's one meeting we'd like to be there for. So we had them as distinguished guests in the front row. And we did identify them, and each stood up and waved and said thank you for the acknowledgement. And then we planned for education and motivation for team members because, of course, we want to keep all of our project team members engaged. So here is the promised dual picture of inside we have our core team and outside we have our sub-teams. So, of course, included on our core team is our project leader, our project manager, our executive sponsor. And in this case, we share as an example, you may have in the purple circle, you may have a travel department representative, you may have a finance team. In fact, I'm almost positive you have at least one finance team member represented on your project core team. Someone from procurement is involved. In this case, we have someone from human resources involved. And we made a few X's just to represent others who may be included on the core team. And then outside the core team are a series of our sub-teams. And again, this is just shared to give everyone a graphic representation of who is going to be on our core team, and if we are large enough to have sub-teams, what might the connections be? So many times, a representative from each of the departments. Let's say we're on a cross-functional project team. So each department is represented both on the core team and with its own sub-team who report to the head of their department or their department representative on our project team. So next, if we have sub-teams, we want to develop detailed sub-team plans. You'll see the parallel and the consistency between the process we followed for developing our core team project plan. So we develop a project overview statement. We identify any and all major activities on our project. We determine the duration. How long do we project it will take to achieve each milestone and the ultimate completion of our project? We create a schedule, determine resources, estimate our costs, identify major milestones. And within creating a schedule, determining resources, and estimating costs, that is where we start to do our more thorough initial risk management and risk assessment. And then to our major milestones, these help us chart progress and track our consistency, our effectiveness, our timeliness at implementing our project and completing it on time and on budget. So what do? We review the major activities, objectives, and project plan as defined by the core team. We do that on our sub-teams, and we also state all assumptions. All right? Okay. So in developing a sub-team project overview statement, you'll see essentially it's the same process as followed for our project overview statement for our core team or our standalone project team. We make sure that all sub-team members are present and that a sub-team project overview statement is aligned with the core team project overview statement. That's all. We want to be sure we have consistency. So next, we're starting to venture here into risk assessment, risk identification, and the beginnings of risk management. So part of that process includes identifying any and all relationships and dependencies between tasks, between different phases of our project. We're going to focus on this slide on different tasks and their interdependencies and relationships. There are three essential types of dependencies relationships between tasks on a project. The first is what we call finish to start. In other words, the from task, the first task, must finish before the to task or second task can even begin. From task must finish before the to task can start. Next is finish to finish. And what that means is that the from task, the first task, must finish before the to task or second task in the sequence can finish as well. Third is what we call a start-to-start relationship. So the from task must start before the to task can start. Those are the three types of relationships and dependencies between tasks on every one of our projects. So we've covered that. Next, we want to establish a schedule for our milestones. I shared an example earlier of a 3-month project team plan and how the core team identified 2 milestones in month 1, 2 milestones in month 2, that gave us 4, and then the final milestone was actually the completion of the project on time and on budget. So we had 4 project milestones, and they were scheduled. A schedule established so that you can track major activities of a project to get an overall determination of how a project is doing. So I share this. This is a very general guideline. I want to be clear about that. A number of projects on which we worked that had 5 milestones or less were generally completed within 1 year. Once we got to more than 5 and certainly up closer to 10 milestones, these often represent a project with a length which is greater than 1 year, unless each milestone is month to month, and then perhaps you complete the project in 10 or 11 months. But again, very general guidelines to consider. How long do we need, and therefore how many milestones do we have and or do we need? I've heard other people who look at it a little differently. They say if our project is scheduled to be completed on time and on budget in a year or less, we should have no more than 5 major milestones. And if our project plan is to finish our project in more than 12 months, then we may want to have as many as 10 milestones. Again, rules of thumb. What is a critical path method, especially what is a critical path method on a project? Well, the critical path is what we call the sequence of activities having 0 float. You ask, what is float? Well, float is the amount of delay that could be tolerated in the starting time or the completion time of an activity without causing a delay in the completion of the project. This is why on every project on which we have worked, we have our initial schedule, and then we build in float, often between each task that has to be completed on a project. This is what we call both risk assessment and planning and taking a solution approach, or some have said this is what we call buffer zone planning. I like both. Okay, all right. That's the critical path method, and that's That's float as it applies to our projects. Okay. Next is we want to manage, bear with me one second, there we go, just want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. We want to next manage our full team member performance. People need to be trained where we complete an assessment of the skills that are needed to successfully complete our project versus the skills that are available among people who we are considering for and or who we've assigned to our project. There should be some team training, and everyone should have a comprehensive understanding of what our project is, what it's designed to achieve, and how our project goal is consistent with at least one of our corporate goals. And then some questions for us to ask ourselves, and in some cases others. This helps address the issue of motivation. It helps project team members to, in some cases, self-motivate and or to consider what their real motives are for working on a project. How will this project benefit you as an individual? How could this project hurt you? Why do you want to create the proposed change? What will be your role in the project? What could make you want to leave this project before its completion? That's a tough one to ask and receive some very interesting answers. The two more prominent answers I've received to this question, the first is, well, you know, we have been talking about moving. Yeah, that could impact it. Sometimes that's why some people leave projects. And frankly, I've never been told this, but there have been several instances of people on projects who the perception is they are looking outside the organization for their next opportunity. And then the third possibility, which does come up with some regularity, is people are promoted, and therefore their prior role before they were promoted was appropriate for serving on a specific project team. However, with a promotion comes added responsibility, and in many cases when a person's promoted, they don't have the time to work on projects on which they were working before they were promoted. And then we manage ongoing meetings, measuring people's performance and holding people, including we start with ourselves, holding ourselves accountable so we can more effectively hold others accountable. What metrics are we going to use? Well, I share here an example that was used by an IT team in an organization that was preparing to move. They had a lease that had about 3 months to go on it when we listed their metrics, and so therefore they were going to conduct a move and get settled in starting about a week before the 3-month time frame, with the understanding that, of course, that last week with the moving was going to be tumultuous, and the first week in their new location was going to be tumultuous. So they said, okay, we need to figure out how are we going to measure our success, because we have approximately 100 users, and we need to be able to set them up in a new location. But before we do that, unfortunately, about a month from now, or roughly 2 months before we're going to move, we're doing a significant Microsoft Office platform upgrade on all 100 computers. And it would be great if we could just send all 100 users one email and say, click here, and your system will be updated. No, doesn't work that way. Sometimes. It didn't work that way in this organization. So they said, okay, in about a month, we're rolling out both an upgrade and a new application. What are our metrics? How will we measure our success? They said, okay, our goal, of course, number one is to have all 100 users set up. Along the way, our goal is that we have 10 or fewer than 10 help desk calls. That's a real challenge. Third, we said we want fewer than 5 bug fixes, also challenging with 100 users. Fourth, they said we actually want to meet 100% of our requirements. we can live with 97 or 98 initially as long as we take care of the hopefully very, very minute percentage of requirements that were not met. And 5, they said within the first month, we want to have at least 90% of our 100 users, 90 of our 100 users trained on how to work with all of their upgrades. And then the other, of course, in the process of setting up a new location, they said, okay, what are our metrics here? And they did come up with 2. First of all, they said they want all users set up, and they actually said within 1 week. However, they decided to work over the entire weekend. In other words, to finish work. They did have people finish work who could by 12 noon. They gave anyone who could take it the rest of the afternoon off. That allowed them to start the moving process. They spent, well, the movers spent Friday night into Saturday morning for getting the trucks ready, well, transported and then ready to be unloaded. First thing Saturday morning, the IT team, along with others, helped get all the equipment set up in the new location and started turning things on. And miraculously, by 9 a.m. Monday, they had 98 of their 100 users set up, and in their defense, the only reason the other 2 users were not set up because they had not remotely responded to the email asking them to enter securely their password so the technicians on the IT team could, once the user from home had entered their password secure, they could then access that user's software. They don't look at it. They just need to get in so they can upgrade all of the user's software and get them set up and ready for work by 9 a.m. Monday to use their computer in their new location. So to have 98 out of 100 users set up over just a weekend, very impressive, and I'm pleased to tell you that by the end of the day Monday, by about 4 p.m. Monday, the other 2 users were set up. So they achieved their goal essentially over a weekend, and then certainly by the completion of day 1 in their new location. Very, very impressive results. Then, of course, we're ready to transition to implementation of our project. So we have a finalized and approved project plan. We make sure that we've secured all the resources that we need on our project, and we're prepared to execute our project in a focused way. So now we're ready to implement and control our project or perform the tasks. So to implement, we execute our project plan, we generate status reports, and we present our report. So first, for progress updates, we execute the tasks of our project. We list our milestones in the form of project report. We report on our progress against each milestone and then the achievement of each milestone by report. That is often shared by email. Sometimes it is shared both by email and via a Skype call or conference call. Sometimes there is a dedicated conference call with 1 or more executives led by either the project manager or project leader. We, of course, need to communicate on any variances that we anticipate in, related to any of the risks that we are anticipating could happen. We highlight any and all critical issues and solutions, and we monitor against our project plan. Secondly, we implement our contingencies. We make sure that we identify any and all risks. We review our contingency plans. Again, contingency plans are how we're going to address each and every one of our anticipated risks. That again speaks to the significant importance of the completion of a risk assessment and risk management plan before we start our project. The more thoroughly and completely we have identified any potential project risks, the greater the probability, significantly greater the probability that we will complete our project on time and on budget. Then, of course, we evaluate the impact of any and all risks on the completion of our plan on time and on budget, and we continue on course. Third, we report our project status. We communicate our project status regularly to our project executive sponsor and or our full team members, and we report the project status to the project executive sponsor or full team members, most importantly at key time points. And we've identified what those key time points are, again, before we've started our project. So here is a template explaining the elements that should be included in a monthly report by project. There's a space, and that could be an attachment, but there's a space represented on the slide identifying the need for an updated financial report. The upper right-hand corner in the print that only a mouse could read, or an ant, is each and every project step and milestone. There's too much to really show in that box on one page, so we minimized one page of a project plan so people could understand. And then there are 6 elements that are important to include in a monthly project report. We list our goals. We list where we say baseline, what is the timeline for achieving each of those goals? What is our current status toward achieving each of those goals? If there is a variance, what is it? Are we ahead of, on time, or behind schedule for achieving one or more goals? And if so, what is it? When we make any change to our projected schedule for achieving a milestone, we want to list here the reason for changing that timeline. And then, of course, we list any critical issues here. What are the critical issues that will help us get back on track towards achieving this milestone if, let's say, we've fallen 5 days behind? Because we understand the importance on our project of completing it both on time and on budget, and when a delay occurs due to some risk, and we're trying to address it, that is when it becomes critically important to be sure that we have the critical issues identified that will help us hopefully get our project back on time so we can complete it on time as scheduled. All right. And then status meetings. In status meetings, we discuss and we resolve issues. We make decisions and we discuss the work that is needed for the upcoming time period in between meetings. In other words, our short-term action plans. What are you working on? What am I working on? Our next meeting is in a week. So what progress will you make on what you're working on related to our project? What progress will I make, do I project I will make, on the parts of the project on which I am working? Very important. We use some implementation tools to help us solve problems, make decisions, and manage conflict. And then for integrating control, this occurs during implementation. Control is an element of risk and helps us to understand the way or ways we can manage changes during a project. Changes often happen. Sometimes there's a delay. Sometimes there's a delay of delivery of materials. Sometimes a certain project team member who is integrally important is out sick. Sometimes an executive sponsor, or a core stakeholder is unavailable. Maybe they're out of the country, they can't participate on a particular Skype call, so maybe we need to reschedule that Skype call. And then integrating control helps us provide documentation to any changes in our project scope, in our budget, and in any resources that we said we need, and now maybe we're having an issue with taking delivery of some of those resources. Okay, So now we're ready to talk about control. We're still performing the tasks of our project, and there's both change control and where we present a report addressing how we are starting to manage change, to control change, and how we expect to finish controlling change. The output here is the decision to either continue to move the project forward, or in some very rare cases, does this roadblock mean we need to terminate our project? And other cases, a project will occasionally, it's fairly rare, but I'll give a consistent example. When there's been a merger or acquisition, one of the first things that the acquiring company does is to ask for and then to review any and all existing current projects on which people are working at the acquired company, and the acquirer, people from the acquirer, make decisions. Do these projects continue or do they terminate, and when? So often this decision is made by someone outside the project team. It happens. Okay. So when we talk about change control, these are the procedures that we put in place to manage any and all changes in scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk, and contract administration. Our change control process includes these 7 steps. We identify the change that is happening and or needs to happen as a result of some issue. We assess the impact that change is going to have on the project. Is it going to delay us? Is it going to cost us more? We evaluate our options for addressing the change. We communicate our desired actions. What steps do we recommend we should take, or others should take, or both, to help us address this change and effectively incorporate it and overcome it? In many cases, we need to gain approval from someone that we can make this change. We adjust our project plan according to the change, and we document the change, all very important. So this next series of slides are a series of templates that help us understand the elements that are included on the various templates, on the various forms during our change control process. So in this, we identify or ID change and assess the impact. So we list the description of the change item, including the reason for change. We estimate the effect on our schedule, plus or minus days. We're ahead of schedule, we're behind schedule. The estimated effect as well on the budget. The estimated effect on the resources that are needed and or available. Do we need more resources or fewer resources, and what type of resources do we need as a result of the change? And if there are any additional tasks, we list them here. So then we need to evaluate our options for addressing the change and gain approval. Here's authorization. Is the change order enacted, yes or no? Signed off by both the project leader and project manager, and when and where applicable, signed off by a stakeholder. We adjust our project plan and document that adjustment. So here's where we finalize. We list the action or actions taken. We list here how was our timeline adjusted, if at all. Did it remain the same? Is it now longer? Did we actually save time, shorten the process? How is our budget adjusted, if at all? Did we add to it? Did we reduce it? Is it still on pace, on schedule? And any adjustments we made to our project risk plan. Sometimes an anticipated risk, when we implement the contingency plan, identifies a second risk that we did not identify before we started. It happens. And when and where that happens, we need to adjust our project risk plan as well. You know, this delay caused a delay in our implementing task number 42 on the project, and how is that going to impact, if any, the completion of our project on time and on budget? And then, of course, we list here who are the other human resources who are impacted. Maybe everyone on the project team, maybe an outside vendor or two, and then maybe anyone else who asked to be kept in the loop, stakeholders, the CEO, whomever. Who else are we going to communicate to, and let's communicate to them. And then there's what we call a change item control log. This is where we list any and all changes which occur while we are implementing our project. Many organizations use a change order number. What was the date we initiated the change? When was action taken? Was this change approved, yes or no? Was there any change to our costs, higher or lower? Was there any delay to our schedule or any acceleration? So did we fall behind or did we move ahead? Are we ahead of schedule? When was the work started on implementing the change, and when was the work completed on implementing the change? And now we're ready to take a quick look at completing our project. The only input that is really necessary is, has a decision been made to end our project, or have we received approval to complete our project? And let's say in this case that our project has been approved as completed on time and on budget. Here is where we conduct the very important lessons learned meeting. We finalize our documentation, we transfer ownership of the project, and we release all resources. So in some detail, lessons learned, we review the commitments that were made, and we solicit feedback on our customer satisfaction, internal and or external, with the review and approval process, how effectively project resources were used, the quality and the frequency of progress reports, and the project process overall. Then we get input from our team, lessons learned. That's a very important team meeting for our project team after it's completed. Let's first review the objectives and deliverables for the project. Let's review the review and approval process. How did we do? Who was on the team? Compare the actual result to the project plan. Did we complete our project on time and on budget? Did we complete ahead of schedule? Did we complete behind schedule? And we then develop improvement ideas. We ask two extraordinarily important questions. What went well? Because we want to know and record, we want to list everything that went well in our project. And what would we do differently? Also very important. Anything where we fell short or something went wrong, talk about how we addressed it. Ultimately, what could we and what could other teams do better on the next project on which people work? What went well and what would we do differently? Then we finalize our documentation. We create an executive summary, often 3 pages or less. I would recommend following those guidelines. Those were suggested to me one day by a CEO who was very, very short on time, and I've been forever grateful ever since, because other executives for whom I've completed an executive summary, I've stuck to that, 3 pages or less, and you perhaps would not believe the number of CEOs who like it on 1 page. That makes it a lot harder, but what the heck. Some of us welcome a challenge. Okay, then we attach reports to our documentation on project variances, feedback from the customer, from the sponsor, and from the team. What were our lessons learned? and recommendations for future projects. Then we distribute that report, very important, and we archive it and or, better yet, save it, upload it onto a corporate intranet so everyone else in our organization can access it as and when needed. Very, very important. And then we transfer our project ownership. We provide all our project documentation. We more than likely provide all that project documentation to our executive sponsor, who now owns the project because we completed it on time and on budget, and we provide any contacts we utilized while we were planning, implementing, and reviewing our project progress. We then release resources. Let's celebrate, hand out rewards for achieved metrics, and we're ready to move on to our next assignment, to our next project. So again, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've covered the 5 phases of a project: initiating, planning, implementing, controlling, and completing. And we had 4 key learning objectives today. We presented this webinar to help you manage your projects even more consistently, to raise everyone's awareness to the process of project management, to help everyone acquire and or hopefully enhance some of our project management skills, and to increase and improve all of our communication skills. And now it's time to turn it back to our host. Please.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Krish. So now we'll open the lines for Q&A session. Anybody having a question can raise your hand by clicking hand button, which is down right hand corner of your screen. Also, you can send your question in the chat window. And Mr. Krish, you can see like there is a question in Q&A. Alexander has asked a question. There is a query.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me just track this here. Oh, okay. So bear with me one second. I want to read this. One of our participants says, "Hi, as a person working on my project, it feels like the change control process has been really burdensome and gotten in the way of making relatively small but necessary adjustments to the features delivered." So that features delivered are workable. Any thoughts? Yes. Alexander, thank you. That's an excellent question. Sometimes, and this is not to cast blame on anyone, but sometimes when we're working on a project, the change control process can become overwhelming. It can feel to some of us, myself included, who are more focused on big picture thinking, as feeling like, oh my God, we're suffering from analysis paralysis. This is just driving me nuts. This is attention to detail gone overboard. It's driving me crazy. What can I do? Well, the first thing I suggest is, Alexander, and every one of us, when you experience this kind of frustration, write down your thoughts and then read them back to yourself, listing out any and all of the real deep frustration you are experiencing. And as you read and review what you've written down about your thoughts relative to your frustration, first think to yourself, okay, how am I going to constructively communicate this frustration to everyone else on the project team? And here are a few thoughts I have about that. First of all, schedule it or request that it be scheduled, that a discussion, let's say for hopefully only 5 minutes, maybe a few minutes more, that an agenda item be included for discussion about our change control process. It could be as general as that. This is Alexander. I'm requesting a 5-minute discussion on our change control process. And because you suggested the agenda item, you have the floor. And it could start with something as simple as, you know, I've been reflecting on our change control process, and first of all, here's where I'm going to interject briefly before you're saying something to everyone on the team. One of the more helpful guidelines I was taught is for constructive feedback. if you want to recommend or request a suggested behavior change, in other words, get us out of the weeds with this change control process, first, start with at least 2 pieces of sincere praise. So for example, I might say, or you might say, you know, everyone on this team works so hard, and a number of us have worked late. Maybe we've worked weekends. This is one of the hardest working project teams of people I've ever worked with, and I want to thank you all for that. At the same time, I'm experiencing some frustration with our change control process, and here's where you get specific. I'm finding it burdensome. I'm finding it time-consuming. Is anyone else experiencing that frustration? Is anyone else experiencing that burdensomeness or cumbersomeness or maybe analysis paralysis or extensive attention to detail? Is anyone else on the team concerned that our change control process is slowing us down? And if so, let's talk about it. So I know that took me a number of words, and I hope that was okay. I hope, Alexander and everyone, that was helpful. So just to review the suggested steps, first write down what you are feeling, the frustration, and be sure to list some specifics, maybe even some specific descriptions. Then rehearse with yourself, how am I going to share this with everyone on the team constructively? Third, schedule it as an agenda item, discuss change control process. Fourth, consider the guidelines for constructive feedback. 2 pieces of sincere praise, then the suggested behavior change, and engage others. Say first what you are experiencing, ask others, are you experiencing something similar? And if you get any agreement, then we have our discussion about what we can do to improve our change control process and hopefully make it less burdensome. So again, I hope that progression and that answer was helpful to Alexander and to everyone on this webinar.
Okay, so I think Alexander, the Q&A session, there are no more questions actually. Mr. Krish?
Yes.
Okay, so you have answered both the questions for Mr. Alexander. And the next one he has written, I try my best to avoid the chance control process as a result.
Yes, I think with respect, I think that was as much a follow-up comment to Alexander's question. Yeah, so Alexander also wrote, I try my best to avoid the change control process as a result. and Alexander and everyone, I get that. So again, I hope the steps I just shared can be a helpful approach. I understand you wanting to avoid it. All I would suggest, and this is not just for Alexander, this is for everyone, is when we avoid something like the change control process, we are now ruling ourselves out from providing any input into what we can do to improve the change control process. So while I get that idea of, oh man, that just bums me out so badly, I don't want to have anything to do with it, just remember that if we do that, we are limiting the allowability of us to provide input on what we can do to improve something we perceive as a problem, and that might translate over to other frustrations that we experience. So when we choose not to participate in the how do we solve this problem process, we might be concerned in the future when we don't have an opportunity to provide additional input. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
No, Mr. Chris, I can't see
Okay.
any questions. I can't see
Okay.
any questions in the chat window or in the Q&A, or nobody has raised their hand. So
Okay.
it's all right. They can still send their question to the email ID webinar@compliancekey.com. Okay. With this, we will end the session. We appreciate your time and believe the session was informative and up to your expectation. We look forward to see you in our next event. Soon you will be receiving a certificate of attendance and a feedback form. Kindly send your comments. Your feedback is important to us. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day. Thank you, Mr. Krish, for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.